My ex-husband broke my 3 ribs and almost killed me. Years later, my sister got engaged to him and my parents defended him. But Tyler cheated on her 1 week before the wedding, and now my parents are begging for the $15,000 they'll never see. I'm 32 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I make more in 1 month than my parents made in 6 months before they retired. And honestly, that information is going to be important later because it has to do with all this craziness that I need to get off my chest. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I met Tyler, because without that part, none of the rest makes sense. Although honestly, I wish I could just erase those years from my life completely. I met Tyler when I was 23. I was working at this shitty call center and still living in my hometown. You know, one of those medium-sized cities where everyone knows everyone and nothing interesting ever happens. Tyler was handsome. I mean, really handsome. The kind of guy you know is bad news, but you're attracted to anyway. And at first, he seemed sweet, attentive, all those things a 2-3-year-old girl wants to hear. We dated for about 6 months, and things were going well. Or so I thought. Until I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, obviously. I was on birth control, but you know how that is. Nothing is 100% effective. When I told Tyler, I thought he was going to freak out. But instead, he surprised me. He said we should get married, that he wanted to do things right, that he was going to be a good father and all that. Looking back now, I realize it was manipulation from the beginning. But at that moment, I was 23. I was scared. And the idea of having someone tell me everything was going to be okay sounded like the best thing in the world. We got married 3 months later in a small ceremony, just close family and some friends. My parents were happy, I think. Or at least they didn't say anything negative. My younger sister, Brittany, who was like 19 at the time, didn't even come because she was in one of her bad phases. She dropped out of high school and was messed up with drugs and questionable people, but that's another story. The thing is that Tyler changed literally the week after we got married, and when I say changed, I mean he became a completely different person. He started going out with his friends almost every night, would come home drunk at 3 in the morning, would spend money we didn't have on online sports betting, and every time I said something to him, he'd yell at me or ignore me for days. I was 4 months pregnant, still working full-time because we needed the money, and he basically spent all his time at home playing video games or sleeping. I lost the baby when I was 6 months pregnant. It was a Sunday afternoon. I started bleeding and feeling horrible pains, and I told Tyler I needed to go to the hospital. You know what he did? He told me I was exaggerating, that it was probably normal, and refused to take me because he was watching a football game with his friends. I had to call an ambulance by myself, went to the hospital alone, and lost my baby alone in a hospital room while the nurses looked at me with pity. Tyler showed up like 5 hours later, smelling like beer, and the first thing he said to me was that it was probably my fault for working too much and not taking care of myself. He didn't cry, didn't hug me, nothing. He just sat there looking annoyed like I'd ruined his day. Something broke in me that day, but I was so depressed and in shock that I didn't have the strength to do anything about it. The next few months were a progressive nightmare, like when you watch a horror movie and things slowly get worse until suddenly you're in complete hell. Tyler lost his job. I think they fired him for constantly showing up late and having a shitty attitude with customers, and instead of looking for another job, he permanently installed himself on our living room couch, playing Call of Duty and eating whatever I bought with my salary. I worked from 8 to 6 every day, would come home dead tired, and he hadn't even washed a dish or taken out the trash. When I'd ask him why he wasn't looking for work, he'd tell me the market was tough, that he needed time to find something good, that I didn't understand the pressure he was under. The pressure he was under, while I was paying rent, utilities, food, everything, with a call center salary that barely covered it. I tried to kill myself twice during that marriage. The first time I took a bottle of sleeping pills, but Tyler found me and forced me to throw up. Not because he cared about me, but because he didn't want to deal with the police and the questions. He never took me to a hospital, never asked me why I'd done it, just yelled at me that I was selfish and dramatic. The second time was like 3 months later. I tried to cut my wrists in the bathtub, but I panicked midway through and called 911 myself. That time I did end up in the hospital. They did a psychiatric evaluation, the whole thing. And when Tyler arrived, he acted like the perfect concerned husband in front of the doctors and nurses. In the car on the way home, he told me that if I tried something like that again, he'd kill me himself to save me the trouble. He said it seriously. I saw his face. And for the first time in months, I felt real terror. Not just sadness or desperation, but actual fear that this man could kill me. I finally gathered the courage to ask him for a divorce. We'd been married for like 2 years at that point. I was 25. And one night after work, I came home and told him, "Tyler, this isn't working. I need you to leave. We're getting divorced." I thought maybe he'd start yelling like always. But instead he went quiet for a moment, looked at me with this expression I can't even describe, and then he hit me in the face, so hard I fell to the floor. He'd never hit me before. He'd been verbally abusive and emotionally destructive, but never physical until that moment. He grabbed me by the hair, dragged me down the hallway to the bedroom, and spent the next 6 hours beating me, screaming at me, telling me he was never going to let me go, that I was his wife and had to obey him, that if I tried to leave him, he'd kill me and then kill himself. He kicked my ribs, twisted my arm, choked me until I almost passed out. At some point, he stopped hitting me and went to the living room to keep playing video games like nothing had happened, and I just lay there on the bedroom floor, unable to move from the pain. I waited until he fell asleep that night. I think it was like 4 in the morning, and I managed to drag myself to the door. I left the house barefoot, with my face swollen and dried blood on my nose and mouth, and went to knock on my next-door neighbor's door, an older lady named Dorothy. She opened the door, saw me, and immediately started crying. She called the police, let me use her phone to call my parents, and stayed with me until the patrol cars arrived. Tyler was arrested that morning. They took him out of the house in handcuffs, while all the neighbors came out to see what was happening. And I ended up in the hospital again, now with 3 fractured ribs, a dislocated arm, and bruises everywhere. The police took photos, the hospital documented everything, and Tyler ended up with a restraining order and mandatory anger management classes as part of a deal with the prosecutor to avoid prison. The justice system is a joke, basically. But at least I didn't have to see him anymore. The divorce was finalized about 6 months later. My parents helped me with the lawyers. I moved back in with them for a while to recover physically and mentally, and Tyler completely disappeared from my life. Or so I thought. I got a better job at a marketing agency, started therapy, and a year later I was offered an incredible position in a city about 8 hours away. I accepted without thinking twice, packed my bags, and left without looking back. I cut all contact with Tyler, blocked his number, his social media, everything. And the next 2 years were about rebuilding myself from scratch. And honestly, I succeeded. At 28, I was making triple what I made before, had my own nice apartment, had started dating someone kind who treated me well, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. This is where the story gets really twisted, because you'd think after all that the worst was over. But no, my own family had something much worse planned. My parents had retired by then, were living on my dad's pension, which wasn't much, and I'd send them money every month to help out, like $500, sometimes more if they needed something special. I also helped my sister Brittany, who was still living with them at 25, worked as a server at a local diner, and honestly had never managed to stabilize her life after leaving school and the drug phase. I wasn't rich, but I was doing well, and it seemed right to help my family, you know? After all, they were my parents and my sister, and even though Brittany and I had never been super close, she was still my blood. One Sunday afternoon, about 2.5 years after my divorce, I was on a video call with my parents. Like our usual weekly call where I'd ask how they were and they'd tell me neighborhood news and stuff like that. My mom looked weird, like nervous. And my dad had that expression he'd get when he knew something was going to cause problems but didn't want to be the one to say it. Finally, my mom dropped the bomb. She said, "Honey, we have to tell you something and we don't want you to get mad, but Brittany is engaged." I said, "Oh, that's great. I'm happy for her. When's the wedding?" And there was this horrible, awkward silence. And then my mom said, "Well, the thing is, she's engaged to Tyler." I honestly thought I'd heard wrong. I said, "Sorry, to who?" And my dad stepped in and said, "To Tyler. Your ex-husband, Tyler. They met about 6 months ago when he went to the diner where Brittany works. They started talking, and now they're together." I felt like someone had thrown ice water in my face. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My younger sister, the same sister who grew up with me, who saw how I came home physically and emotionally destroyed, who knew perfectly well what Tyler had done to me, was engaged to my abuser. I asked them if they were joking, if it was some kind of sick joke, but my mom started getting defensive, saying that Tyler had changed a lot, that he was in therapy, that he'd completed his anger management classes, and that Brittany was happy with him. I exploded. I started yelling at them over the video call, telling them that Tyler almost killed me, that he made me lose my baby through his negligence, that he turned me into his financial and emotional slave, that I tried to kill myself twice because of him. My dad interrupted me and said, "Well, Jessica, Tyler told us his version of the story, and he says you were very dramatic, that you exaggerated everything, and that the fight that led to the divorce was because you provoked him. Can you believe it? My own father saying I provoked, getting beaten until my ribs broke." My mom added that Tyler had told them I was controlling, that I humiliated him for not having a job, and that the miscarriage was natural, not his fault for not taking me to the hospital. I told them it was all lies. How could they believe him over me, their own daughter? And my mom just said she had to be fair and listen to both sides of the story. I ended the video call right there, started shaking from fury and disbelief, and spent the next 2 hours crying on my living room floor. When I calmed down a bit, I decided I needed to prove to them once and for all that Tyler was a monster, and I wasn't exaggerating anything. I scheduled another video call for the next day, and this time I prepared evidence. I had copies of the medical reports from the hospital when I lost the baby, where it clearly said I arrived alone and had been bleeding for hours without attention. I had the photos the police took the night they arrested Tyler, where you could see my bruises, my swollen face, my dislocated arm. I had the restraining order, the anger management class agreement, the divorce documents where Tyler had admitted to the domestic abuse. I had text messages from that time where Tyler called me a useless bitch, told me he wished I'd die, threatened to kill me if I left him. I showed all of that on the video call. My parents looked uncomfortable. My sister Brittany was there too, and she just stared at the screen expressionless while I went through document after document, photo after photo. When I finished, there was another silence, and then Brittany spoke for the first time. She said, "Jessica, I don't know why you insist on being so dramatic about this." Tyler explained everything to me. He says you drove him crazy, that you worked too much and were never home, and that the baby thing was a tragedy, but it wasn't anyone's fault. I literally felt like my brain was going to melt. I said, "Brittany, I'm showing you proof. Official medical reports, police photos. What more do I need?" And she laughed, like a mocking little laugh, and said, "Look, I'm sorry you lost your baby, but you can't blame Tyler for that forever. Plus, he says he wasn't even sure the baby was his." That's when something completely broke in me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was pure cruelty. My sister, defending the man who had destroyed me, mocking my miscarriage, insinuating I'd been unfaithful, all while my parents sat there, saying nothing in my defense. I asked my parents directly, "So what? You're going to allow this? You're going to let her marry him?" And my dad said, "Jessica, we're adults. Brittany can make her own decisions, and if Tyler makes her happy, then we have to support her. She's our daughter too." I said, "And what am I? Aren't I your daughter?" And my mom sighed and said, "Always so dramatic, Jessica, always making everything about you. Your sister finally found someone and you can't be happy for her for 5 minutes." Then Brittany dropped another bomb. She said that after the wedding, Tyler was going to move into my parents' house with her, that they were going to live there while they saved for their own place. So not only were they getting married, but Tyler, my abuser, my ex-husband who had put me in the hospital, was going to live in my parents' house, eating their food, using their space, probably not paying anything knowing how he is. I told them that if they did that, if they allowed that, then it was over between us, that I couldn't have in my life people who chose my abuser over me. My dad got angry and said I was being selfish, that I had to get over the past, that Tyler had changed and deserved a second chance. A second chance. Like breaking 3 of my ribs was a small mistake that could be forgiven with time. I told them this was my line in the sand, that if they went ahead with this, they were going to lose me forever. And my mom said, "Well, Jessica, if you decide to distance yourself from your family over this, then that's your decision, but we're going to support Brittany." I ended the video call, blocked them on everything, and completely cut off the money I sent them every month. No more $500 a month for my parents. No more extra help for Brittany. Nothing. If they were going to choose Tyler over me, then they could ask Tyler to pay their bills. About a week later, the desperate messages started. Brittany wrote me from numbers I didn't have blocked, telling me, how could I be so cruel to cut off their money, that my parents depended on that help, that Tyler didn't have a job yet but was looking, and that I was a bitter bitch who couldn't get over the past. My mom sent me a long email crying about how they'd counted on that money for the month's expenses, that my dad's pension wasn't enough for everything, and that I was abandoning them in their old age over a whim. A whim. Like defending my dignity and refusing to finance my abuser's life was a childish whim. I responded to them once, a message that simply said, "If Tyler is as wonderful as you say, then he can support you." And then I blocked those numbers and that email too. About 2 months passed, 2 months of beautiful peace, where I didn't know anything about them and could concentrate on my life, my work, my new relationship, my therapy. And then I received a message from my aunt, my mom's sister, saying she needed to talk to me urgently about Brittany. I thought maybe someone had died or something serious had happened, so I called her. My aunt told me that Brittany had caught Tyler in bed with another girl, like literally found them having sex in Tyler's room at my parents' house, 1 week before the wedding. Brittany threw a massive fit, threw the engagement ring in his face, and kicked him out right there. My parents kicked him out too, obviously, and now everyone was in crisis mode trying to cancel the wedding that was supposed to happen in 3 weeks. I'm not going to lie. I felt a dark and deep satisfaction when I heard that. I wasn't happy that Brittany got hurt. I'm not a monster. But I felt an intense vindication knowing that Tyler had proven to be exactly what I'd told them he was. A liar, a manipulator, a cheater, a piece of shit who had never changed anything. My aunt told me my parents wanted to talk to me, that they felt terrible about how they'd handled everything, and that they hoped we could reconnect. I told my aunt I appreciated her telling me, but I wasn't ready to talk to them, and that they needed to understand that actions have consequences. Another 4 months passed. I continued with my life, got a promotion at work, moved to a bigger apartment. My relationship was going better than ever. And then, one day I received an email from my dad from a new account I didn't have blocked. The email was long, apologizing for everything, saying I was right about Tyler, that they'd been bad parents for not believing me, and that they wanted to rebuild our relationship. But then, at the end of the email, came the real reason for the contact. My dad had had an accident at home, had fallen off a ladder while trying to fix the roof, and had broken his hip. He needed surgery. The operation cost like $15,000 that his insurance didn't fully cover, and they were desperate for money. The email ended with, "I know we don't deserve to ask you this after everything, but you're our only hope. Please, Jessica." I read that email like 3 times, and each time I felt more clarity about what I had to do. I didn't respond. I didn't send them money. I didn't reestablish contact, because I finally understood that the apology wasn't real. They just wanted money, like they'd always wanted my money. If they truly felt bad about betraying me so horribly, they would have sought to reconnect with me much earlier, when they didn't need anything from me. But they only showed up again when they needed money for my dad's medical bills. And you know what? Let Tyler pay them. Let Brittany use her server. Salary, let them sell things, let them get a loan, let them do whatever, but I wasn't going to be their bank again. Now I'm 32. I live in a city I love. I have a job I'm passionate about, a partner who respects me, friends who truly support me, and 0 contact with my family of origin. Sometimes I feel bad about my dad and his broken hip. I'm not going to lie. But then I remember how he looked at me on that video call and told me I provoked Tyler to hit me. And it passes. I've built my own life from the ashes of what Tyler destroyed, and I'm not going to let toxic people, even if they're my blood, back into my space just because they need me. I learned the hardest way possible that sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood, but the people who choose to stay by your side when things get tough. And my family, the ones who share my DNA, showed me they were never really on my side, so I moved forward without them. And honestly, I'm better off this way. It's not the happy ending I imagined when I was 23 and got married, thinking I was going to have my own beautiful family, but it's my ending, and it's one where I'm finally at peace.